The crowd was screaming. Families were waving banners, crying, laughing, holding up phones to capture every second of this milestone. And then there was me, standing alone in my cap and gown, staring at an empty seat in the third row. I had saved it for him, my dad. Moved my purse there during the processional march, draped my program over the armrests like a reservation sign. I thought maybe he got stuck in traffic. Maybe he was late. Maybe, this time, he'd show up. He didn't. The arena smelled like cheap perfume and fresh flowers. Corsages pinned to proud mothers, bouquets ready for photo ops. Around me, other graduates were bouncing on their heels, adjusting their caps, whispering excitedly about parties later. Their families were screaming their names before they even got called, holding homemade signs with glitter and inside jokes. Mine was silent. You know that moment when everybody else's family is screaming your name and yours is silent? It's strange how loud silence can be. Gabriella Marie Reed! The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. I forced my legs to move, one foot in front of the other, across that stage. Cameras flashed. Someone handed me a cylinder, my diploma. Proof I'd made it through 4 years of late-night study sessions and ramen dinners. I smiled for the photographer, the way you're supposed to. Wide, proud, like my heart wasn't breaking. Because that's what I'd learned to do my whole life around him. Pretend I wasn't bleeding when I was. I shook hands with the dean, some board members whose names I'd already forgotten, and walked back to my seat while applause rippled through the crowd. Not for me specifically, just the general rhythm of celebration that comes with hundreds of names being called. I sat down and looked at that empty third row seat again. The woman next to it, someone else's grandmother probably, had placed her purse there now. She had no idea she was sitting next to a ghost. When I was 14, my dad pawned the necklace my mom gave me before she left. It was small, just a silver chain with a tiny heart pendant, but it was the last thing I had from her. He said it was just for a week to cover an expense. Told me family helps family. I never saw it again. At 17, he needed my signature on paperwork for a used truck. Just to help my credit, kiddo, I promise. 6 months later, I found out he'd missed 3 payments and my name was on every collections call. When I turned 19, I discovered he'd used my social security number to open a cell phone plan. 4 lines, none of them mine. The bill went to collections before I even knew it existed. Each time, I forgave. Because that's what daughters do when they believe the story that love sounds like sacrifice. But this time, graduation, I wanted something different. Just presents. That's all. Not money, not favors. Just him, sitting in that seat, clapping when they called my name. Apparently, even that was too much to ask. I walked out of the arena with my diploma in one hand and my phone in the other, waiting for a message that never came. No congratulations. No, proud of you, kiddo. Just the soft vibration of group texts from other graduates. Happiness that didn't belong to me. The parking lot was chaos. Families polling for pictures against the sunset, balloons tied to car antennas, someone's dad lifting them onto his shoulders like they weighed nothing. I wove through it all, invisible. And then I thought I saw him. Silver pickup, window cracked. The same kind he drove when I was little. For a split second, I actually waved. But the driver wasn't him. Just some stranger, checking their phone, oblivious to the fact that they'd just broken my heart for the second time that day. It never was. I drove home to my tiny apartment, the one I'd scraped together with 2 part-time jobs and student loans, sat in my car for 20 minutes in the parking lot, still wearing my cap and gown, watching other people's Instagram stories light up my feed. everyone else's dads in matching ties, everyone else's families at crowded restaurants. I finally went inside, tossed my cap on the couch, and stared at the diploma still in its cardboard tube. 4 years. Summa cum laude, first in my family to graduate college. And I was completely alone. 3 days passed. 3 days of congratulations texts from friends, professors, distant relatives who barely knew me. 3 days of pretending the absence didn't hurt. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe it was him. Maybe he'd lost his phone. Maybe he had some explanation, some emergency that made missing graduation make sense. I opened the message. Can you send $5,000? It's urgent. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement that he'd missed the biggest day of my life. Just a transaction request written by a man who'd taught me that I was only valuable when I was useful. I remember sitting in my empty apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. I was moving to start a new job in 2 weeks, feeling this strange calm wash over me. Not anger, not sadness, just a kind of clarity that feels almost electric. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I thought about all the times I'd said yes, all the times I rearranged my life, my budget, my boundaries to make room for his emergencies. All the times I believed that if I just helped one more time, proved my loyalty one more time, he'd finally see me as more than a bank account with a heartbeat. I typed one word. No. Then I set my phone face down and waited for the storm. He called 5 times, then 6. Each call lit up my screen like an accusation. I watched them come in, one after another, and felt nothing. Then, silence again. I blocked the number. The next morning, I called the locksmith. Told him I needed new locks on my apartment door, all of them. He showed up that afternoon, a middle-aged guy with kind eyes and calloused hands. While he worked, he made small talk about the weather, his daughter's soccer games, normal things that normal families do. When he finished, he handed me the new keys and gestured to the old lock mechanism he'd removed. These were corroded, he said, rusted through from the inside. You're lucky they were still working at all. I looked at the metal dust on the ground and thought, yeah, that sounds about right. The lock, just like him, had been vulnerable in all the wrong ways. Broken where it mattered most. That night, I lined up my 3 new keys on the kitchen counter. Shiny, uncompromised, mine. For the first time in years, I felt safe in my own home. 2 days later, someone knocked. Hard, deliberate. The kind of knock that doesn't ask permission, it demands attention. When I opened the door, 2 police officers stood there. Are you Gabriella Reed? One asked, his expression neutral but professional. I nodded, confused. My mind raced through possibilities. Car accident? Mistaken identity? Some administrative issue with my new job? We need to ask you some questions, the other officer said. Your father filed a report claiming you're withholding funds that belong to him, says you owe him money from a loan repayment. A laugh almost escaped my throat, but it caught somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. Of course he did. Of course, when I finally said no, when I finally drew a line, he weaponized the system against me, turned law enforcement into his personal collection agency. Officers, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I don't owe him anything. I've never taken a loan from him. If anything, he's used my identity without permission for years. They exchanged glances, the kind of look that said they'd seen this before. Family drama dressed up as legal complaints. They questioned me for 10 minutes, asked polite, procedural questions about our relationship, financial transactions, any written agreements. I answered honestly, showed them my bank statements on my phone, and explained the pattern of manipulation that had defined my entire childhood. When they stepped outside to confer, I heard one of them say quietly, "This is a civil matter. Personal vendetta." They came back, apologized for the inconvenience, and one officer lingered at the doorway as his partner headed to their car. He lowered his voice. "You might want to get a restraining order." Not as an officer, but as someone who'd seen where these stories lead. I nodded. Didn't say a word. Couldn't. After they left, I closed my new lock and slid to the floor, my back against the door. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. This was my life now. Saying no, setting boundaries, and paying the price for both. But somehow sitting there on the cold floor with my knees pulled to my chest, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because for the first time, the chaos wasn't mine to carry. An hour after the police left, I was still sitting on the floor with my back against the door. My phone was face up on the carpet beside me, silent for now, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. He'd find another number. He always did. I pulled myself up, legs shaky, and walked to the kitchen. Poured a glass of water I didn't drink. Stared out the window at the parking lot below where normal people were coming home from work, carrying groceries, living lives that didn't involve police questioning about fabricated debts. The officers had been professional, almost gentle, but their presence had left something behind, a residue of violation that clung to the air. He'd weaponized the system against me, turned law enforcement into his personal collection agency. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. That realization settled in my chest like a stone. Not surprise, not shock, just this crystallizing clarity that he would never change. That every boundary I set will be met with escalation. That saying no to him meant declaring war. I thought about the officer's parting words. You might want to get a restraining order. Not a suggestion, a warning. Someone who'd seen where these stories lead. My phone buzzed on the counter. New number. I stared at the screen, watching it light up with an incoming call. Unknown. But I knew. My finger hovered over the decline button. Then I answered. Silence first. Then breathing. You didn't have to embarrass me, he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, the tone he used when he was trying to sound reasonable while seething underneath. I didn't have to lie, I answered, surprised by how steady I sounded. Lie? He laughed, sharp, bitter, the kind that sounds like glass breaking. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head when your mother abandoned us, and this is how you repay me? There it was, the script he'd been running for years. Every favor weaponized, every act of basic parenting reframed as debt I could never repay. I missed my graduation, I said quietly. I had things to handle. You're not a child anymore, Gabriella. The world doesn't stop because you want attention. I didn't want attention. I wanted my father. He paused. The kind of pause that felt like standing on the edge of something. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder. Meaner. You know what your problem is? You think you're better than me now. Got your little degree, your little apartment, think you don't need family anymore? I could picture him pacing wherever he was. Kitchen, probably. The same one where he used to sit me down and explain why he needed my help just this once. The same counter where he'd lay out paperwork that I was too young to understand but old enough to sign. I never said I was better than you, I said, walking to my window, staring out at the streetlights flickering on in the dusk. You think it. I can hear it in your voice, all high and mighty, calling the cops on your own father. I called the cops on you, I interrupted, feeling something shift inside. Not anger exactly, something colder, more certain. You called the cops on me. You filed a false report because I wouldn't give you money. It wasn't false. You owe me for everything I've done for you. I was a child, I said, my voice rising despite myself. Children don't owe their parents for being raised. That's not how it works. That's called being a father. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear him breathing, imagining the calculations happening behind his silence, which button to push next, which manipulation might still work. You're really gonna do this? He said finally. Cut me off? After everything? I'm not cutting you off, I said, surprised by the truth of it. I'm just not saying yes anymore. Same thing. No, I said softly. It's not. I heard him inhale, sharp and quick. You think you're so smart, but you're going to regret this. You're going to need me someday and I won't be there. See how you like being alone. And there it was, the threat wrapped in prophecy, the promise of abandonment from someone who'd been absent my whole life. I looked at my reflection in the window, tired eyes, messy hair, graduation cap still visible on the couch behind me. I've been alone my whole life, I said quietly. The difference is now I finally see you. Silence. Real silence this time. Not the calculated kind. The kind that happens when someone realizes their usual tactics aren't working. What's that supposed to mean? His voice had lost its edge, replaced with something that sounded almost uncertain. It means I'm not confused anymore. I spent years thinking something was wrong with me, that if I just tried harder, gave more, sacrificed enough, you'd finally love me the way daughters are supposed to be loved. But it was never about me. You don't know how to love without ownership. And I can't live like that anymore. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Well, your honesty just cost you your family, he snapped, the anger back, sharp and familiar. No, I said, feeling something break loose in my chest. Not breaking apart, but breaking free. Your behavior did. I heard him take a breath, gearing up for another round, another manipulation, another guilt trip. But I didn't wait. Don't call me again. And I hung up. I stood there holding my phone, waiting for the familiar flood of guilt and panic that usually followed standing up to him. Waiting for the voice in my head that said I was being cruel, ungrateful, selfish. It didn't come. Instead, something else settled in. Something quiet and light. Not happiness exactly, more like relief. The silence after his chaos left didn't hurt this time. It healed. I walked to the couch and sat down, pulling my knees to my chest. The apartment felt different, bigger somehow. Like I'd been living in a smaller version of it, and suddenly all the walls had expanded. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another call. This time, I didn't answer, just blocked it and set my phone face down on the coffee table. He called 2 more times from 2 more numbers over the next hour. I blocked them both without listening to the voicemails. Each time I hit block, it felt a little easier, like exercising a muscle I'd never known I had. Around midnight, I got up and made tea. Chamomile, the kind my roommate from freshman year used to make when she was stressed. I never understood the appeal before. What could hot leaf water possibly do to fix anything? But sitting there in my quiet apartment, holding the warm mug between my palms, I got it. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about creating a moment of calm in the chaos. A small ritual that said, "You're safe now. You can rest." I thought about the officer's warning again. Restraining order. Maybe that's what it would take. Legal boundaries to enforce the emotional ones he'd spent a lifetime teaching me not to have. Tomorrow I'd look into it, call a lawyer, figure out what my options were. But tonight, I just sat in my own apartment with my new locks and my blocked numbers and let myself feel the relief of not crying after hanging up on him. For years, his approval was the thing I chased, his presence the thing I craved, his love the thing I thought I couldn't live without. But sitting there in the silence, I realized something. I didn't need him to change. I didn't need him to see me, value me, or love me the way I deserved. I just needed to stop waiting for it. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. 5 days later, another envelope came in the mail. No return address. I almost threw it away. My mailbox had become a graveyard of coupon flyers and credit card offers addressed to current residents. But something about the weight of this envelope made me pause. Too heavy for junk mail, too plain for anything official. I carried it upstairs, set it on my kitchen counter, and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was paperwork from a private lender. Cash Now Financial, one of those places with commercials promising fast approval, no credit check. The kind my father would use. A loan application, his handwriting, my name, and a signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone who didn't know the difference between trust and manipulation. For a few minutes, I couldn't move. My hands went numb holding the paper. The letters blurred together. I read the same line 3 times, borrower's signature, before my brain could process what I was seeing. He'd forged my signature, taken out money in my name. 3 months before graduation, while I was studying for finals and planning my future, he was building debt in my name like a bomb with a delayed fuse. It felt like holding proof that everything I wanted to believe about him was gone. Not damaged, not complicated, just gone. I set the papers down carefully, like they might explode if I moved too fast. Walked to my bedroom, sat on the edge of my bed, breathed. Part of me wanted to scream, to call him, to demand an explanation, an apology, something that would make this make sense. But a bigger part, the part that had survived the empty graduation seat, the false police report, the guilt trips disguised as love, that part knew better. Confrontation would be useless. He'd deny it, twist it, say I misunderstood or that I owed him anyway, or that this was somehow my fault for cutting him off. No, this required something different. Not emotion, strategy. I pulled out my laptop and got to work. First, I scanned every document, every page of the loan application, the forged signature, the terms and conditions, saved them to 3 separate folders: cloud storage, external hard drive, email drafts. Evidence doesn't do much good if you lose it. Then I drafted an email. Short, clinical, no emotion bleeding through the words. Subject: identity theft report. Body: father used identity without consent. Attached: 8 files. I sent it to the local police department's fraud division, the lender's compliance department, and the Federal Trade Commission's identity theft reporting website. Clicked send, leaned back, felt nothing and everything at once. The next part was methodical, almost meditative. I called Cash Now Financial first. Spent 40 minutes on hold listening to generic jazz before reaching a real human. Explained the situation. Forged signature, identity theft. I never authorized this loan. The representative was sympathetic, but bureaucratic. You'll need to file a police report and send us the report number along with your affidavit of fraud. I already filed, I said. I'll have the report number by end of day. Then we'll flag the account and begin our investigation. It can take 30 to 60 days. That's fine, I said. I'm not in a hurry. Because I wasn't. For the first time in our relationship, I had time and he didn't. Next, I called the 3 major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Placed fraud alerts on all of them, then went a step further and froze my credit entirely. The process was surprisingly simple: just my name, social security number, date of birth, addresses from the past 5 years. Within minutes, my credit was locked down tighter than my new apartment door. No new accounts, no new loans. No one could use my name for anything without me explicitly lifting the freeze first. I changed every password I had: email, banking, social media, streaming services. Created new security questions with answers only I would know. Mother's maiden name? Nope. Now it was favorite fictional character, with an answer he'd never guess. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. I'd spent 6 hours dismantling his access to my life, brick by methodical brick. And I felt calm, purposeful, like I was finally doing something that mattered. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. Just a photo, no words. I opened it. His house, the one I grew up in with a crooked mailbox and overgrown lawn, police lights flashing outside, red and blue, cutting through the evening shadows, and him, sitting on the curb, head in his hands, while 2 officers stood nearby with notepads. I stared at that image for a long time. Part of me expected to feel guilt, the dutiful daughter script that said I should feel terrible for causing this, that family protects family, even when a family hurts you. But that voice was quieter now, almost inaudible. Instead, what I felt was relief. And something bigger, something that felt like justice, finding its own level. For once, the reflection wasn't mine to carry. He'd built this, signed my name on paperwork I never saw, used my identity like it was a tool in his garage, and now he was sitting on the curb, explaining to police why he thought that was okay. I saved the photo, not to gloat, not to celebrate, just to remember, to have proof that actions have consequences, even when you spend a lifetime pretending they don't. Then I deleted the message and blocked the number. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother. We hadn't spoken since I was 16. She'd left when I was 12, packed 2 suitcases and moved 3 states away without much explanation. He'd told everyone she abandoned us, couldn't handle his ambition, chose herself over family. I believed him then, resented her for leaving me behind. But now, sitting in my quiet apartment with Ford's documents still spread across my kitchen table, I wondered what she'd known that I was only now learning. The phone rang 4 times. I almost hung up. Then she answered. Hello? Her voice was older than I remembered, softer. Mom, I said, it's Gabriella. Silence, long enough that I thought she might hang up. Then, I know. I didn't know where to start. I need to tell you something. And I did. Everything. The graduation, the money demands, the police visit, the forged loan documents. It poured out of me in a way I hadn't expected. Years of holding it together finally cracking open. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence stretched again. Then she sighed. Not exasperated, just sad, like she'd been waiting for this call for years. She warned you, she said softly. What? When I left, I tried to tell you, but you were too young, and he was too good at making me look like the villain. My throat tightened. Tell me what? That he doesn't know how to love people, Gabriella, only use them. And when you stop being useful, you become the enemy. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry it took you this long to see it. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from learning it the hard way. I closed my eyes, tears sliding down my cheeks. Why didn't you take me with you? I tried, she said. He threatened to make it a custody battle, said he'd drag it out for years, make me look unfit. I barely had enough money to get myself out. I couldn't. She paused. I thought you'd be safer there than in the middle of a war. I wasn't safe, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence together, connected by phone lines and years of misunderstanding finally unraveling. You did the right thing, she said finally. Reporting him, setting boundaries, that takes more courage than I had at your age. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels necessary. That's what courage is, doing what's necessary, even when it hurts. We talked for another hour about her new life, my graduation, the future I was building. When we finally said goodbye, she made me promise to call again. You're not alone anymore, okay? Okay, I whispered. And for the first time in years, I believed it. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of peace that felt like learning a new language. One where silence was comfort instead of punishment. My mornings developed a rhythm. Wake at 7, coffee first. Real coffee from the French press I'd bought myself, not the instant kind I used to settle for. Sit by the window, watching the neighborhood wake up. Touch the things I'd chosen. The new lock first. Solid brass, still smooth under my fingertips. No rust, no corrosion eating through from the inside. The thrifted lamp on my corner table. Turquoise ceramic base with a cream shade. $20 at an estate sale. The woman selling it said it had belonged to her mother. I liked knowing it had a history that wasn't mine to carry. And the photo, my graduation photo, just me in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, smiling alone. I'd framed it and hung it above my desk, not as a reminder of absence, but as proof that I'd made it through anyway. Some nights I'd come home from my new job, entry level at a consulting firm, nothing glamorous, but it was mine, and just walk through my apartment touching these things, reminding myself that this life was real, that peace could be permanent if I protected it. The police investigation into the forged loan was ongoing. I'd gotten updates every few weeks, interviews conducted, documentation reviewed. prosecutor considering charges. I didn't push, just let the system do what it was designed to do. Mom and I talked every Sunday. Long conversations about nothing and everything. She told me stories about the years we'd been apart. Her life in Tennessee, the small bookshop she managed, the garden she tended. I told her about work, my apartment, the therapy sessions I'd started attending. We were building something new, not trying to fix what was broken, but creating something that had never existed before. A relationship between two people who'd survived the same storm. I felt whole, maybe for the first time in my life. It was a Tuesday morning when I saw him. I'd stopped at a diner off I-71 on my way to work, one of those retro places with checkered floors and vinyl booths. My usual coffee spot was closed for renovations, and I needed caffeine before a 9 o'clock presentation. I walked in expecting eggs and silence. Instead, there he was, sitting in a booth by the window, eating pancakes like nothing had happened. My body stopped moving before my brain caught up, just froze in the doorway while the hostess asked if I wanted a table. He looked older, thinner, his hair grayer than I remembered, his flannel shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. But his hands moved the same way, cutting pancakes into precise squares, forks scraping against plate with that familiar rhythm. And then he looked up, saw me, and smiled. That practiced smile, the one that used to fool teachers, social workers, neighbors, the one that said, "I'm harmless, I'm charming, I'm just a guy trying his best." It didn't work anymore. I saw it for what it was, a mask worn so long he'd forgotten there was a face underneath. "Gabriella," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "What a coincidence." The hostess looked between us, confused. "Do you know each other?" "We're family," he said, gesturing to the empty side of his booth. "Come sit, kiddo. We should talk." The word kiddo hit like a slap. He'd called me that my whole life, usually right before asking for something. I stood there, holding my work bag, wearing the blazer I'd bought for my new professional life, and felt a strange calm settle over me. "No," I said simply. His smile flickered, just for a second. "Come on, don't be like that. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." "I don't have 5 minutes," I said. My voice sounded steady, normal, like I was declining a timeshare pitch, not refusing my father. "You've got time for coffee, but not for me?" He spread his hands, palms up, the universal gesture of innocence. "I just want to talk, clear the air." A waitress passed between us, carrying plates. Other diners were starting to notice. I could feel their attention shifting our way, the drama more interesting than their breakfast. "There's nothing to clear," I said. "Everything's already been said." His jaw tightened. The smile stayed, but his eyes changed, hardened in a way I need too well. "So that's it? You're really going to do this? Stand there and treat me like a stranger?" "You are a stranger," I said quietly. "You always have been." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Unbelievable. You know I tried. I called, I reached out, but you blocked me. Sicked the cops on me, turned everyone against me. You forged my signature on loan documents. You filed a false police report. You used my social security number without permission. You did those things." His face flushed red. "I'm your father. Being my father doesn't give you the right to steal my identity." Silence. the kind that feels loud. Other customers were definitely watching now, their breakfast conversations paused. He set down his fork carefully, leaned back, studied me like I was a stranger he was trying to figure out. "Can't believe you do this to your own father," he said finally, voice low and bitter. "After everything I did for you, everything I sacrificed." There it was, the script he'd been running my entire life, the narrative where he was the victim and I was the ungrateful child. I looked at him, really looked, and felt nothing. No guilt, no anger, no sadness, just the quiet recognition that some people will never take accountability, will never see their own role in their own destruction. And I didn't need him to. I caught my reflection in the window behind him, calm, professional, whole. "Goodbye," I said, and I turned and walked out. He didn't follow, didn't call after me, just let me leave. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, waiting for the shaking to start, for the guilt or doubt or fear to kick in. It didn't come. Instead, I felt light, grounded, like I'd passed some test I hadn't known I was taking. I'd seen him, refused him, and survived. No, not survived. Thrived. I drove to work and gave my presentation. Nailed it, actually. Got compliments from my supervisor about my confidence and clarity. Went out for lunch with coworkers who were becoming friends. Came home to my quiet apartment as the sun was setting. And that's when I remembered. The old lock, the one the locksmith had removed 6 weeks ago. I'd kept it, tucked it in the kitchen drawer without really knowing why. I pulled it out now. Heavy, rusted, corroded from the inside out. For weeks, it had just been junk I couldn't bring myself to throw away. But now, holding it in my hands with the memory of this morning still fresh, it felt like something else. Proof of survival. Evidence of transformation. I carried it to my bedroom window, the one that faced east, toward the sunrise. Set it on the windowsill carefully, like placing a trophy. The sun was just starting to rise, pale orange light slipping through the blinds. It hit the rust and metal and turned it golden. Not beautiful exactly, but meaningful. This lock had failed at its job, let corrosion eat through from the inside out until it barely functioned, just like every boundary I'd tried to set with him for 23 years. But I'd replaced it, put in something stronger, something that actually worked. And now the old one could sit here as a reminder, not of fear, but of change. I stood there watching the sunrise turn the metal different shades of gold and bronze, and felt something settle deep in my chest. Peace doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It just arrives. Quiet, steady, real. I hadn't realized how quiet mornings could be when you're not waiting for someone to apologize. How light a home could feel when you're not bracing for the next demand. How much space there is to breathe when you finally stop making room for people who only know how to take. I touched the old lock one more time, then turned away. My coffee was getting cold. I had emails to answer, a life to live. And for the first time in 6 weeks, maybe in my entire life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder waiting for the next explosion. The storm had passed. I was still standing. And the door was locked. Peace doesn't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic music. It doesn't knock on your door and declare its arrival. It just settles in, quietly. Like a neighbor you never noticed moving next door until one day you realize they've been there for months, and the street feels different because of it. Safer, calmer, more like home. That's how peace arrived for me. Not all at once, but in small moments that accumulated like interest in a savings account I didn't know I'd opened. The morning I didn't check my phone first thing, bracing for another unknown number. The evening I laughed at a coworker's joke without the heaviness in my chest that used to follow joy. The feeling that happiness was borrowed and would have to be repaid. The Sunday afternoon call with my mom where we talked about recipes and weather instead of trauma and survival. These moments stacked themselves into days. Days became weeks, and somewhere in that time, I realized I'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I'd taken the shoes away, changed the locks, built a life where dropping things wasn't even possible anymore. You know, people talk a lot about forgiveness. Society loves that narrative. The wronged person rising above, turning the other cheek, making peace with their abuser. They tell you to forgive so you can move on, so you can heal, so you can be the bigger person. But here's what they don't talk about: boundaries. They tell you to make peace, but not how to make locks. They preach about family being everything, but never about what to do when family is the thing destroying everything. My father used to say family means never turning your back. He weaponized that phrase my entire childhood, made it sound like loyalty, like honor, like love. But what he really meant was family means letting me take whatever I want from you and calling it devotion. I believed that story for 23 years, believed that setting boundaries made me selfish, that protecting my peace made me ungrateful, that saying no made me a bad daughter. But the truth, the one that took me too long to learn, is simpler and harder than that narrative allows. Family doesn't mean never turning your back. It means knowing when to stop letting someone rob your peace. And sometimes, love looks less like forgiveness and more like distance. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is change the locks. I keep that old lock on my windowsill now, the rusted one that failed at its job, let corrosion eat through from the inside until it barely functioned. Every morning when I wake up, sunlight hits it first, turns the damaged metal golden, makes something broken look almost beautiful. It's not a reminder of fear anymore. It's proof of transformation. Proof that I survived, that I recognized what wasn't working and replaced it with something stronger, that I chose function over familiarity, safety over sentiment. Some people might think it's strange, keeping a broken lock like a trophy, but to me, it's evidence. Evidence that I'm not the person I was 6 months ago, standing in my apartment waiting for my father to show up to graduation. Evidence that boundaries aren't betrayal, they're survival. Evidence that you can love someone from a distance and still be whole. Maybe more whole than you've ever been. If you've ever had to build distance just to breathe again, if you've ever had to choose yourself even when it felt selfish, you get it. You understand that moment when you realize the person hurting you won't stop just because you ask nicely. When you finally accept that some people are more committed to their dysfunction than to your well-being. You know what it's like to be told you're overreacting when you're actually underprotected. To hear, but they're family, from people who've never had to choose between their peace and their bloodline. To feel guilty for protecting yourself because you've been taught that self-preservation is selfishness. But here's what I learned, what I'm still learning every single day. Their disappointment is not your responsibility. Their anger at your boundaries is not proof that your boundaries are wrong. It's proof that your boundaries are working. Setting limits isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-respect. And you don't owe anyone access to you just because they share your DNA. Tell me, where are you watching from? Because I'd like to know how many of us finally changed the lock too. How many of us are sitting in quiet apartments we chose, touching possessions we saved for, building lives that don't include apologies for existing? How many of us had to learn that no is a complete sentence? That you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm? That walking away from toxicity isn't abandonment, it's liberation. I think about the version of me that stood at graduation, staring at that empty seat, still hoping he'd show up, still believing that if I just waited long enough, tried hard enough, sacrificed enough, he'd finally see me. That version of me thought love meant endurance, meant absorbing damage and calling it devotion. But this version, the one sitting here now with new locks and old scars and a life I actually want to live, she knows better. Love doesn't hurt you and then ask you to pretend it doesn't ache. Real love doesn't demand you shrink yourself to make room for someone else's chaos. Real love respects boundaries, honors no, celebrates your growth instead of resenting your evolution. And if someone can't give you that, even if they're your parents, your sibling, your blood, you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to choose peace over performance, distance over destruction, yourself over anyone who requires you to be less than whole. The story doesn't end with him changing, doesn't conclude with him realizing what he lost and begging for forgiveness. This isn't that kind of story. This is the story where I changed, where I realized I didn't need his acknowledgement to validate my pain, didn't need his apology to grant myself permission to heal, where I learned that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or public exposure. It's just living well. Building a life so full of peace that their chaos can't reach you anymore. It's changing your locks and realizing you don't spend your nights listening for footsteps. It's answering the phone without fear because you've blocked every number that ever brought you pain. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back, not because they're perfect, but because they're finally, blessedly free. If this story hit something in you, if you felt that recognition in your chest, that ache of seeing yourself in someone else's struggle, I need you to know something. You're not alone. You're not broken. And you're not wrong for wanting more than crumbs of affection from people who should be giving you entire meals. Somewhere right now, someone is reading this and crying in a bathroom because they needed permission to stop answering the call. Someone is holding their phone, staring at a text, demanding money or time or energy they don't have, wondering if saying no makes them a terrible person. Someone is preparing to walk away from their entire family because staying means losing themselves. Share this story. Not for me, but for them. Because somewhere, someone is still waiting for the courage to change their lock. And maybe, just maybe, hearing that it's possible, that someone survived and thrived, will be the thing that gives them permission to finally turn the key. My life now isn't perfect. I still have moments of doubt, flashes of guilt, days where I wonder if I did the right thing. But then I come home to my quiet apartment, touch my new lock, look at my graduation photo hanging on the wall, proof that I made it through even when no one was cheering. And I remember this piece is mine. I built it. Brick by boundary. Lock by lock. No one can take it from me unless I hand them the key. And I'm never doing that again. So here's to everyone who changed their locks, who chose distance over dysfunction, who learned that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's boundaries that actually work. Here's to the empty seats we stopped saving, the calls we stopped answering, the guilt we stopped carrying. Here's to rust becoming gold in the morning light. Here's to peace that doesn't announce itself, but settles in anyway, quiet and permanent and real. Here's to knowing when to turn your back and walk away, not because you're giving up, but because you're finally, powerfully choosing yourself. Because family isn't supposed to be the thing you survive. It's supposed to be the thing that helps you thrive. And when it's not, you're allowed to build a new definition, a chosen family, a life that actually feels like home. You're allowed to change the locks. I did, and I've never slept better.